Time for another DraftScience video presentation. Probably need more light, but whatever. Alright, so the math for the double slit. So I didn't play this video because it's really the same old crapola, so maybe I'll go back to the beginning just to show you that, you know, he's just doing the single impediment math. It doesn't have anything to do with actually getting this pattern correct. There's not enough variables in his math to have any hope of describing this pattern. You know, exactly what I said is true turns out to be true. So let's go over some of the statistics. So there's two different patterns. Okay, I should be able to show that without too much difficulty. This one should be the one with more bars. So this one actually has twice as many, turns out. So there's 14 little bars in here, and the other one there's 7 little bars in here. And that turns out to be pretty much consistent with what my expectations were going to be based on the numbers. So I guess I'll just leave this one up. Alright, so what you find is if you take the smallest distance, so here's the two experiments. One just has the 0.25 impediment and one has the 0.5, so it's just a doubling of the size of the impediment. So the slits are staying the same, and all that's being changed is the thickness of the middle impediment, which also changes the thickness of the outside dimension. So the furthest away surfaces and the closest surfaces are what you're really looking for. And if you use those two numbers, you get the perfect ratio, which is 8 to 1 in this case. 7 was close, but 14 is exactly on, 14 to 1. So for this case, the 0.5 millimeter impediment, the number matches perfectly. The other number's a little bit off. 7 and 8 aren't the same number, but that just could be because this isn't exactly, you know, they didn't manufacture it exactly right. As you get smaller, it gets a little more difficult. And so if this inside impediment was a little bit off of the 0.4, or this wasn't quite 0.25, you know, then you'd expect a different number. But it's close anyway. And this one's right on. So that's how I would look at it anyway. So the point is that when you make this change, you're changing this distance and you're changing this distance, the outside distance. Now, neither one of the important distances are in the math they do. So the math they do just has the distance of the impediment, and you get numbers that are completely, you know, 6 to 1. There's not 6 little nodes inside of there, and there won't be 12 and a half. Okay, there's, you know, so it's not predicting either pattern, and it's certainly not predicting the envelope pattern, which is 100. But by comparison, there's always something. Alright, I should be alright. A little bit of allergies. I go running in the morning, and sometimes the air will kill you. Anyway, so I guess that's all that needs to be stated, is that it comes out pretty close. The ratios, what would be predicted if you just analyze the experiment as surfaces and you're measuring the distance between the surfaces. So let's go back to the beginning of his video and we'll play some of this and just point out how he's still talking about waves and bullshit that doesn't really have anything to do with the actual, even what's in their math. Again, they're not sitting here and looking at the experiment and saying, well, what's this distance between the middle of the opening and the middle of the opening? They're not using that distance. Okay, so you know, they're cheating the experiment all over the place in terms of trying to force it to be a wave theory, that two waves are going through the openings. The openings have nothing to do with it, which this single impediment experiment sort of demonstrates. That this isn't about making waves. It's about photons traveling near surfaces and being affected by the surface. I would argue the obvious answer is there's electrons on the surface, they're hitting electrons, electrons scatter photons. And the simple answer suffices to explain the experiment. No entanglement, no superposition, no wavetons, no this same photon interferes with itself kind of crapola. Alright. So, but their math is horrible. Their description of the experiment is horrible, and people just keep making excuses for that, which is really disgusting. So you can see from the drawing itself, this isn't the double slit pattern. You know, he's still even drawing it with the old idea that first you put the light through a single slit. That's before lasers. You needed to do that. You don't need to do that when you have a laser beam. And so he doesn't even do that. So it's just more crap.
With some scissors, 2 slits that light can pass through. And then what you see on the far screen is not 2 bright spots on the far screen. That's not.
Yes, when you wouldn't see 2 bright spots on the far screen anyway, because they're only going to be a half a millimeter apart by your own concession. The 2 slits are only a half millimeter apart. They're going to travel in a straight line to the screen, create 2 blobs of light 1/2 millimeter apart. So the laser beam's divergence is already going to be fairly large, you know, a few centimeters at maybe, well, let's say at a meter, it might be a centimeter. And so you have 2 blobs that are only 1 millimeter out of alignment. Tiny amount of difference. And all you're going to see is 1 blob because, you know, there are 2 headlights shining on a surface and they're shining in almost the same location. You're not going to see 2 headlights.
What you see is bright, dark, bright, dark, bright, dark.
Right, but that's not what you see. You see that happening, and then you see it goes to dark, dark, okay, more dark, and then it starts over again. So you have 2 reoccurring patterns.
Bright fringes, the bright regions called bright fringes, and the dark called dark fringes.
And again, they're not even close to being equal at all. I mean, if you go back to the original image and look at it, inside of the envelope, the envelope goes all the way from one end to the other end in the sense that it's completely a gigantic, huge, bright compared to the little tiny one little node of dark. So the small number, the 100 number, okay, the ones fitting inside of it are almost 90% light, and then 10% dark, and then 90% light, and then 10% dark. I mean, that's how it is. It's not like they're even or equal.
They repeat themselves. It's not like if you have a shotgun and you shoot at these 2 openings, you know, a piece of metal and 2 openings in a piece of metal, what you'll see on the far screen is a bunch of shot in 2 different places. That's not what happens here.
Yeah, well, it is, but you're just not able to see it the way it is because of the distances that are so far. So if you did it exactly the way the experiment's done, that is, using the same distances, then you'll find out it does the same thing. You know, I mean, obviously we can see the difference between inches, you know, 2 slits inches apart.
You get these alternating dark and bright fringes. Why? This looks a lot like some problems we did in chapter 17. If we define delta L as L2 minus L1. And remember...
So he's just saying the change between 2 different lines. And so again, he's doing the same thing. The 2 lines that are converging in the center, I've already argued and pointed out, they can never get outside of the tiny, tiny bit of space. So if your separation is half a millimeter, they can't get out of a half a millimeter. So they clearly can't make a big giant node because they can't get out of that 1/2 millimeter space. That's where they're forced to exist in. They can't create pattern over here and over here and over here and over here. They have to create it all in that 1/2 millimeter space. So obviously they're not terribly relevant to what's really happening. And again, see how he drew the lines coming out of the openings when the distance he's using in the math is the distance of the impediment. So it's just so deceptive, it's inaccurate, it doesn't get correct answers, It's just wrong, 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 and everybody just keeps defending it. It's disgusting.
That coincides with m equals 1. Also, a bright fringe and constructive.
All right, so, you know, I really, there's just no point. I've played all of this crap so many times. He's arguing, defining something, the double slit pattern, by using one variable, the distance between the openings. That one variable is describing the single impediment experiment. It's not describing the double slit experiment. Because in the case of where your impediment, as drawn here, is much larger than your slit openings, the slit openings are deciding the envelope pattern. So you have to have that number in your math, or you're not going to get the envelope pattern. No chance at all. So the math is totally incomplete, and it's in fact inaccurate, because the variable that's irrelevant in this case is the very variable they're using. The variable that doesn't mean anything. If I used a wire in here, a really small impediment, then the distance of the impediment is the smallest distance between two surfaces. And it's the relevant, it's going to decide the envelope pattern. But as soon as I make the single impediment bigger than the opening, then it switches. And now the opening is going to decide the envelope pattern. That's a fact. I think it's been established through these videos and these arguments that that's the truth of the circumstance. And, you know, so he's using a variable that in this case isn't relevant, because the only variables you need to figure out exactly what the pattern is going to be is you need to know the slit opening, because it's the smallest dimension, and you need to know what the outside dimensions are, the two furthest points. And once you have those two numbers, then you'll get the right answer. And you'll predict both the envelope and the stuff in the envelope, the ratio.
Interference.
All right,
What about this guy here? Delta L.
Let's just jump ahead. See, they just keep doing the same math problems over and over and over. Has nothing to do with the reality. It doesn't. See, this doesn't happen. It's a real pattern. It doesn't get gradually lighter and gradually darker. You can see the bars are almost continuous brightness throughout their whole, you know, across them. It's all the same brightness. And that's what's happening is the places where there are photons, you get these oval shapes. This isn't predicting oval shapes. You know, it's just such a distortion. And they have these, what they're really predicting is one tiny location where there's constructive interference, and a tiny location where there's destructive, you know, perfect destructive, that is a half wavelength out of alignment, and perfect constructive. And this whole ambiguous middle is just that, ambiguous. So here he is, he's showing us what happens in the single impediment experiment, the single needle experiment. This is not the math for the double slit experiment. It's just so bad, egregiously bad, grotesquely bad. And again, no one protests, no one says anything. Everybody just sits back and eats this garbage, this terrible diagram, and this you know, parallel lines that converge theory. Their whole mathematics is based on a notion that can't be true. The parallel lines can't converge, you know. So they're not even using. They're overtly cheating the experiment by making, you know, by perverting it into, you know, saying, oh, we'll accept a whole bunch of errors right in the beginning because of these shortcuts we're going to take. So they take a couple little mathematical shortcuts that clearly are going to create distortions in your solution, and those distortions are going to get worse and worse the further out you try to go. The bigger you make your angles, the more inaccurate it's going to be, because those lines are converging lines. They're not parallel lines. So there's so much to say. I've said it all already. And again, all I get is crap from people, and it's just really irritating. These insipid defenses. So I'll read one stupid, insipid jerk comment here. It's, you know, this, it's just fuck you people. I mean, this is just such horse shit. They're overtly, their model is wrong. They have math that's their model. Okay? This is their prediction of reality. This is their definition of reality. It's overtly wrong. It's not a little bit wrong. It's not a tiny bit wrong. It's completely wrong. I shouldn't have to keep singing that. Alright, little pause. Alright, let's continue. So, infamy. A lot of mathematics used in physics are idealized interpretations of the world. So that's just mush. You know, what does that mean? Yeah, sometimes you just you say, let's just make a world where there's no friction. What would happen if there's no friction? There's nothing wrong with doing that, because it's explicitly stated as part of the premise. There's no statement here saying, oh, we're doing an idealization where we don't have to get the right answer. We're going to use a variable, frankly, and just ignore the other variables that have to be in the solution. You have two patterns. You're going to use one variable to decide the dimensions of two different patterns. How can you can't possibly succeed in doing that? It won't work. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely irrational. And here you are just justifying it like somehow, well, it's a mathematical necessity to completely cheat the reality and misdescribe it and pretend that you can get the right answer by only measuring one thing. You know, I mean, do you really think the double slit experiment can be dissected by looking at just how big the impediment is in the middle, the distance in the middle? That's going to tell you all you need to know about the double slit experiment. You don't need to know how wide the slits are. They're irrelevant. The slits, the openings are irrelevant. The outside surfaces are irrelevant. That's their theory, asshole. Do you think they're describing the world? Idealized interpretations of the world? These aren't idealized. They're completely nonsensical. They're cartoons of the world. I'm not good at math. So here you are, you're just going to talk shit. You don't know anything about the goddamn subject, and you're just going to talk shit to defend a bunch of crap. Why? What is your incentive here? I don't really understand. Okay, but I'm pretty sure kinetic energy is a calculus derivative. Why? Why are you pretty sure? What would even calculus have to do with it? I mean, it's so obviously bullshit. I mean, you really think, okay, when Newton made a pretty simple equation, like even just looking at it in its rawest form, all right, you know, force equals, all right, the change in your momentum over, now that is mv, okay, over time. You say that it makes sense that you can take this simple thing, okay, mv divided by time, and it somehow makes sense to pervert it into 1/2 mv squared. That what it's really saying is this. That somehow this is really saying this. It's some sort of rational derivative. Derivative of what? How can you possibly pervert this? And again, the time element is just a rate number. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's clearly what Newton's saying is the force equals the change in your momentum. And this is just going to tell you at what rate it's doing it. So, I mean, Newton wrote this to be used as for a gravitational equation, because we like to know at what rate gravity affects you, because it's a timed equation. How much you fall in gravity depends on how much time you're in the gravity. That's what Newton's overtly saying. How much time you're in gravity will decide how fast you're going. All right, how much force affects you depends on how much time you spend in the gravity. And if you are moving over past an object that has gravity, the gravity here changes, and the gravity here is changing. Okay, there's less gravity here, more gravity here. So he's basically saying, how much time were you in the strongest gravity? How much time were you in this much gravity? How much time were you in this? That's what this time thing is for. All right, so in the real world of collisions, Newton's just saying force equals the change in your momentum, because forces are going to give you momentum. That's what they do. They transfer to you their momentum. But you really think there's a, oh, this is rational. Yeah, I can convert mv. Somehow when Newton said mv, equals F, you say, oh no, this is what he was really saying. 1/2 mv squared. Fuck. Idiot. You're a fucking idiot. Alright, is a calculus derivative. Bullshit. It's a derivative of them pretending there's such a thing as a scalar and a vector quantity. Because all they're going to do is sit there and pretend. The difference is they're going to use this kind of bullshit rationalization. The idea is that you could say something has energy in a direction. All right, but you might not know what direction it's in. So it could be in the X direction, it could be in the Y direction, or it could be in the Z direction. All right, so you don't know. So what you do is you set up the equation to say something like, okay, it's got a velocity, all right, but we're going to use a dot product to trace what the velocity is in. Okay, is it in the X direction, or is it in the Y direction, or is it in the Z direction? And this all would be a percentage. Okay, so you would say, oh, it's 0.5 in this direction, and it's 0.4 in this direction, it's 0.1 in this direction. Now, if we just made this linear and just says it's left to right or whatever, again, this is dot product is just telling you what it is. Is it 90%? Is it 10%? Is it some kind of percentage? And that's why you would use it to multiply by, because if you multiply v times v, right? Oh, now you have v squared. But if you just say I'm going to multiply it by 1, okay, the whole number, or 0.9 or 0.8, you'd understand that then you're going to modify the v. Okay, now the v goes down. It doesn't get squared. It goes down. So this v is the dot product. It's really supposed to be a 1. You're supposed to multiply it by, oh, it's completely in this direction, 100% in this direction. So that's what the dot product is for. And what they did is just pretended we can just erase all of this, and we'll just not pretend this is supposed to be a fraction. Okay, and we'll just say, no, it's v squared. But that's how they did it. That's not calculus. That's not anything. That's crap. All right, the calculus derivative that there's some use for in some calculations or another. So you're just saying to me, Jesus is such a good story. I'm sure they didn't just make it up. I mean, I'm sure he walked on some kind of, okay, maybe it wasn't really clear water. It was kind of muddy water, maybe, but it was still water. And there's every good reason to believe that Jesus walked on the water. No, there's no good reason. And you don't know anything about the subject. You haven't done anything to look into the history, especially of this kinetic energy formula. Again, invented by a guy who was overtly imposing religion on science. Overtly saying, your science is too irreligious. Okay, you must put more God in it. That's what you're defending, you fuck. There's no perfect picture of a physical event. Fuck you. Where do you get this crap from? What do you mean? We have slow motion film now of bullets going through bananas and shit. What do you mean there's no perfect picture? Fuck you. We're getting closer and closer to perfect pictures. Yes, we're never going to see photons. This is truth, okay? We're never going to see a photograph of a photon. All right, but we're going to get close enough to seeing enough photographs to see that what the universe is made out of. It's not made out of this wooey crap. All right. Physical event because one would need to see it from all sides. You don't need to see it from all sides. You need to see it maybe from two sides. See the profile and then see the face on. Then you can figure out what an elephant is, and you can see the difference between an elephant and a horse. Not too tough to do. So all of this bullshit that we can't find the answers, and the only way we can find the answers is to listen to people who are overtly getting wrong answers. Overtly telling you fables, 200-year-old storytelling. They're telling you it's the double slit experiment when it has this in it. This. Okay? I'm going to tell you how the double slit works by analyzing this. He's overtly doing that. Overtly. I'm going to ignore this over here, and I ignore this over here, and I ignore this, and I ignore this, and I'm just going to pay attention to this and tell you what the double slit experiment does. I mean, fuck. And you post this horse shit. Anyway, there's no perfect picture of a physical event because one would need to see it from all sides. Maybe I actually don't really understand your problem. Yeah, you don't understand shit. I've pointed out grotesque paradoxes in the kinetic energy formula. I played Professor Lewin's video and explained to you pretty simply how, oh yeah, it's a perpetual energy machine. If what he's saying is accurate and the truth. Fuck. There's just no point. I mean, you people are just belligerently fucking stupid. You are fabulist. You're obviously all religious kooks. You have some underlying belief in all of this horse shit. And why? Why do you believe? Why do you want to believe in this stupid, wavy bullshit world? This jiggling jello universe. Ugh. Anyway. Likely because I'm not good at math or physics, but you'll comment on the video nonetheless, so you can't really follow along is what you're saying. Okay, I agree, you can't really follow along. It's way over your fucking head. You really don't want to pay enough attention. I mean, I can't make it any clearer. They say the single this is a double slit experiment. This is what they think it looks like. This is what their math is analyzing. Their math are analyzing this, and they're saying this is the double slit experiment. You can't, you fucking, that's over your fucking head, that's obviously not the double slit experiment. Fuck. Lightly because I'm not good at math or physics. You, spelled with a U, could reference a book. Yeah, well, what? The whole point is that they're teaching this bullshit. This is the doctrine, okay? That we have the Pope and the Catholic Church, and they're basically saying nobody can speak anything else. We'll call them pseudosciences and hide them in a corner. Nobody can argue with them, you fuckhead. I've shown that in the videos. You can't even bring up these subjects at a forum without being censored, okay? Without being shut up really quickly. So fuck you and this crap. A book. Or text that has some correct mathematics for physics. So again, what is this baby talk? They can't describe a single slit experiment accurately. They can't dissect it correctly, and you're saying I trust them on all of their mathematics. Just show me some mathematics and I'll agree with it. You don't know any mathematics, yet you'll be able to judge good mathematics from bad mathematics. Just pathetic. 3 thumbs up for that pilot fucking goddamn tripe. Fuck you. Ugh. He has, on his own channel, he's badly reading Plato. These are the people, this is the whole problem with the world. They think somebody 2,500 years ago or 3,000 years ago had all the fucking goddamn answers. They hadn't even figured out running water, you fuckhead. Alright. This asshole said, what the hell is this? Well, okay, that's on the dead guy, so forget that. We'll do this fucking piece of shit. Alright, Galileo gave us all motion is relative. But he didn't give you, there's no absolute universe. Okay, there's just no, yes, the fact that we can only perceive things as relative. We can only compare horses to ponies to mules to donkeys. Okay, we have to make relative comparisons. All right, perceptual comparisons. But there's a real universe somewhere, fuckhead. Shit for brain. And in that universe, okay, everything has, you can identify who is really moving. All right, and even now we can do that. I mean, there's some things you can understand and say, okay, it's pretty improbable that the whole universe is going that way. So it looks like I'm walking down the sidewalk. No, it's probably pretty clear that I'm obviously walking against the motion of the Earth's rotation. Anyway, 400 years later, it is understood that the probability of the released object approaching the Earth is equal to the probability of the Earth approaching the released object. That's not even true. Obviously, the object, the Earth, isn't going to move in any way that we could ever see. So why even talk about the Earth moving when the fact is the Earth won't really move? I mean, tiny pieces of its center of gravity, yeah, will be, in some respects moved, but I mean, it's such a slight amount and it won't really go anywhere, where the small object is going to be substantially moved. I mean, it's going to be an obvious movement of, it's going to gain a lot of velocity where the Earth isn't, because it has a lot of other shit tugging on it, i.e. gravity. Yet the modern brain refuses assent. Why? I don't even know what that means. Assent to what? What are you talking about? And then why? You should at least put a question mark. Why? What are we supposed to accept here? 400 years later, it's understood that the probability, why even are we talking about a probability? It's a certainty, it's not a probability. Of the released object approaching the Earth is equal to the probability of the Earth approaching the released object. Again, it won't approach it. Asteroids, the Earth doesn't move into asteroids, so obviously it doesn't work that way. As a practical matter, the location where the objects are going to hit isn't going to be decided by how much the Earth moves. It's going to be decided by how much the small object moved. So your premise is, I don't even think it's not even a correct premise. And then you ask why. So that's just confusing mush. So we'll just say fuck that too. Alright, whatever. This ferrocell thing, this is more crap. Okay, amazing video. You gotten the ferrocell right. I do disagree on a few things, but overall is very good. Yeah, this whole, you're an authority. Oh, you disagree. Oh, I'm really worried about that. I wonder if you could make an argument explaining your disagreement. Ugh, it's just so irritating. But anyway, obviously there's nothing to the ferrocell. It's just a gimmick, eye candy. Okay, the real, what it's really doing is just showing. It's showing what iron filings would do when released, when free to do what they would want to do, rather than being stuck, with a barrier between them and the magnet. But yes, they're just doing the same thing iron filings would do if you give them more freedom to move. But anyway, all right. So that's it. The rest of the comments are all crap. They're always crap. Nobody just says what needs to be said. That conventional physics is it's a religion. It's just a bunch of fables, a bunch of storytelling, and horrible evidence, non-existent evidence. Again, the kinetic energy thing, if they were right, they would have proved it years and years and years ago. They would have shown us pouring 4 times more gas in the engine. There would have been some example showing us where all this extra energy, doing actual work in the world. The fast things doing more work. They don't do more work. They just evade friction, generally speaking. That's it. Fast things evade friction. That's all. That's all there is. They don't have more energy. Oh, God. It's so simple, and this is so stupid, and the history is so bad. The clay experiment. Oh, we proved it with clay experiments. Shit. I mean, if I did this, if I created some new theory based on evidence as bad as them, you'd rip me to pieces. Is the fact. The fact is, you'd find all the flaws in the logic. You'd find flaws in the math. You'd find flaws in every bit of it. But you won't direct any scrutiny at all to this conventional physics mush where they just make shit up. They, establish a straw man, like in the case of the entanglement experiments. They're straw men. They set up a straw man. They do a light polarization experiment, and they say because the outcome isn't, they assume the outcome's supposed to be 50-50. Like half the light gets blocked going this way and half the light, but it doesn't work out half and half. It's not the truth. It's not a physical fact. It's not when they even established. And then they prove that, hey, it's not 50-50. So therefore, they must be entangled because it must be some entanglement thing that caused them not to be 50-50. It wasn't 50-50 going in. It's that kind of simple, how bad the physics is. And you just keep defending it. Keep defending it. It's disgusting. Fuck. Anyway, enough of a video. Fuck this fucking stupid moronic planet of belligerently stupid fucktards. God, I hate it here. Anyway, so fuck you. That's what all I got to say. Fuck you.